Hello, good evening, my friends. Today is Thursday, and I gave you as an assignment to read chapter one of the textbook of written by Manfred Stiger, which is on globalization and a very short introduction. And I hope that you have read the article. And today I'm going to give you a short lecture. By the way, I have sent in the Google Classroom a a link wherein you can take the test, the globalization test, and I would like you to give I would like you to take that exam and send to me report to me the result of your exam. I think that is a self-administered. You just follow the link and then try to take the exam and answer the questions honestly. Actually, there is no right and answer to your. There's no correct or wrong to your answers, but an honest, open-ended answer will be a very good point wherein we can see ourselves at what point or at what level is our knowledge of globalization or excuse me, or shall I say, how globalized are you? Okay, so in this evening, I would like to give you a short lecture. Then later on, I'll give you another lecture on globalization. So allow me first to share my screen. Okay. And later on, if you have questions, you can write your questions on the chat box or the chat box of the Zoom, or maybe you can just send it to the GC. Okay. So let me share now uh, my uh, my screen. Okay. So I'm sharing to you now screen. So welcome to the first lecture in this subject. Defining globalization. In the assignment that I gave you, I asked you the question why globalization is considered to be a contested concept. What do I mean by contested concept? Meaning to say, ang ibig sabihin ng contested concept ay maraming tao ang nagbibigay ng definition about globalization, but nobody gives a satisfactory answer or a definite or a scientific answer to the term. So this is what we are going to dissect this evening. And in the first part of the article that I gave you to read, the author Martin Steger gave the picture of Osama bin Laden. So this dissecting the personality of Osama bin Laden, and uh, I hope that you followed through with the description in the book, and I'm sure you know Osama bin Laden, and Osama bin Laden has long been gone. Matagal na siya, namatay siya, at siguro maliliit pa kayo noon. That was in 1990s or early 2000 nang mauso yung war on terrorism, yung 9/11. And sapagkat ang 9/11 na yon ay it gave rise to Osama bin Laden, to the story of Osama bin Laden being the leader of a radical Islamist group, and who was quite sophisticated because of his connection, because of his wealth. So coming from a wealthy Saudi Arabian family, so Osama bin Laden is a well-educated person and well connected, and he has his own leadership and organizational skills, and he is also driven by a very strong and deep religious, social, and political convictions about what he believes to be the injustice in the world and what it is to stand for his idea of Islam and his political ideas of what it should be. Okay. So kung sinundan ninyo yung pinababasa ko sa inyong article ay nakasaad doon, it is said in that it is said in that article that Osama bin Laden was having a television. So habang sinasalakay ng Amerika ang Afghanistan, and while President George Bush of America declared war on global war and terrorism, sabi niya noong mga 2004, sabi ni President George Bush, the war on terrorism will not be a short war, but it will be a long one. It may take years, and it may take also several decades to accomplish. And dito sa CNN, sa interview ng CNN reporter, Osama bin Laden was being interviewed somewhere in a remote place in Afghanistan, undisclosed location, for security reasons, and maybe because he was running from the American CIA, etc., etc. And because of that, hindi pa nag-iisang oras na natapos ang interview kay Osama bin Laden, sumambulat na sa mga TV networks around the world yung kanyang sinasabi doon ni Osama bin Laden. So sumasambulat na siya doon sa worldwide international media. So ngayon, kung makikita mo si Osama bin Laden, if we will dissect him, I wish I had a picture of him here with that interview, but I don't have it today. And I suppose I know the link. I have the link, but I forgot to post the link of that video clip about the interview of the CNN reporter's interview with Osama bin Laden. And Osama bin Laden was hiding in a cave somewhere in Afghanistan, in the mountains of Afghanistan, and he had his own satellite telephone, and he has also his gadgets, electronic gadgets, communications gadget. And you see, kung titingnan natin yung mga gamit ni Osama bin Laden, these are all the products of modernization. These are all the products of the modern world. These are all the products of globalization. Kasi nga ito ay galing sa ibang bansa, yung kanyang mga ginagamit, yung kanyang mga relo, yung kanyang mga telepono, mga cellphone, radio, and even the weapons that he is sporting, and even the jacket that he is, the camouflage military jacket that he is wearing, yun ay parang nagsisimbolo yun ng globalization. So he is benefiting from globalization. But at the same time, despite of this modernization and modern conveniences that he is trying to utilize to advance his ideas, if you examine the idea of Osama bin Laden, you will find out that his ideas are more of archaic. Kumbaga, ang kanyang mga pinaglalaban ay yung mga medieval religious belief about kaya nga sabi nga ng mga Al-Qaeda movement, si President George Bush daw ng Amerika at saka si Pope Benedict daw ay mayroong alliance, which is taking the cue from that words, parang napaka-archaic. It's archaic, it's napaka-imposible ng kanilang mga paniniwala, pero pinaniniwalaan nila yon sapagkat yung structure ng kanilang paniniwala, structure ng kanilang kaisipan ay nakapattern doon sa medieval history ng Islam, which they are trying to preach today. Yan ang kanilang pinagsisikapan na ipaliwanag. Okay. Na ay pinagsisikapan niyang ina-advance niyang idea. So living in the modern world but promoting a medieval belief, a medieval conception of the world, and sometimes because these are ideas in their minds, this is how they interpret the things that happen around the world. Okay. So let us go back to the term, and I hope that our example of Osama bin Laden will help us understand and also affirm the complexity of the word globalization, because globalization is a complex word, and it's a very difficult one to define. medyo magkape po tayo sapagkat ako ay napaka-hectic ng aking schedule at kulang ang oras natin. Okay. Okay. Ngayon, let us first look at several definitions from Frederick Jameson, professor of literature at Duke University. Sabi niya, the concept of globalization reflects the sense of an immense enlargement of the world communication as well as the horizon of the world market, both of which seem far more tangible and immediate than in earlier stages of modernity. So, marami siyang term dito ginagamit. Pero si Frederick Jameson was underscoring the economic aspect of globalization. Yun ang kanyang emphasis. And he spoke that even in the past, maybe prior to modernity, there was already some form of interaction, globalization happening. But in our modern world, it is a little bit more tangible. Meaning to say, nakikita talaga may mga ebidensya at nakikita at nararanasan na nating lahat itong tinatawag na globalization. And modernity started during the 14th century. Di ba naalala ninyo yung the history of exploration when people began to explore the world, when people began to travel and establish colonies, these were the times na nagsimula noon yung tinatawag natin na modernity until our present time. In fact, sabi nga ng mga historian, ang ating panahon ngayon is no longer called modern but rather postmodern. But that is beside my topic. That is beside my point. But I made mention of that because probably if you would like to enlighten yourselves more, you can search on Google about the meaning of modernity and postmodernity. Okay. So, okay. Let me go to another definition by David Held, professor of political science at the London School of Economics. So, according to him, globalization may be thought of as a process or a set of process which embodies a transformation in the spatial organization of social relations and transactions, assessed in terms of their extensity, intensity, velocity, and impact generating transcontinental or interregional flow and network of activity, interaction, and exercise of power. So, in other words, para kay David Held, ang emphasis niya doon sa kanyang definition is that globalization is a set of process. It's not only just one process, but a set of several integrated processes that happens. Okay. So let's go to another definition again from Roland Robertson, professor of sociology at the University of Pittsburgh. So according to him, globalization as a concept refers to the comprehension of the world and the intensification of consciousness of the world as a whole. So in this definition, Robertson was underscoring the importance of the idea of a unified consciousness, a consciousness of the world as a whole. People were no longer thinking of their own countries, of their own race, of their own ethnicity. People are no longer just concerned with their locality, but they have now the consciousness that they belong to a bigger world than what that one they were used to. Okay. So let's go to another definition. This time, this definition comes from James Mittleman, a professor of international relations at the American University. So according to him, globalization compresses the time and space and aspects of social relations. Here in this definition, James Mittleman gives emphasis on the importance of social relations. So globalization comprises the time and space aspects of social relations. And then, because si Martin Heidegger taking a cue from all this definition. Kasi sabi ni Martin Heidegger, yung mga definitions daw na currently being propagated or given by some scholars or given by some media personalities are circular. It globalization, the term globalization, a little bit more vaguer, vague and difficult to understand, difficult to dissect, and difficult to perceive. That's why Stiger suggests this kind of definition. So, sabi ni Stiger, globalization refers to a multidimensional set of social processes that create multiplicity, stretch, and intensity worldwide, social interdependencies and exchanges, while at the same time fostering in people a growing awareness of deepening connections between the local and the distant. So it refers to a multidimensional set of social processes. So multidimensional. Anong ibig sabihin ng multidimensional? Kumbaga parang sa isang square or sa cube, marami siyang side. May harapan, may likod, may ilalim, may ibabaw, may sideways. So multidimensional. But despite of being multidimensionally located, it is still part of an integral whole. That is a set of social processes that, sabi dito, that it create relationships. It multiplies and stretch relationship and intensity worldwide. Parang saan world? Parang let me how does this multiplicity how does this multiplication, how does this stretching and intensification happens? Maybe I can give an maybe allegory, or no, not an allegory but rather a situational comparison. Halimbawa, pag ikaw ay nagpa-Facebook, sometimes you have the list of your friends, and sometimes you also see the list of your friends, and later on you discover that that your another friend is also a friend of his friend, etc. So you see the interconnectedness. So ganyan ang social processes na nagaganap sa mundo ngayon. So nagki-create siya ng mga panibagong relationship, nagki-create siya ng panibagong intensity. Like for example, halimbawa, sabi ngayon ng LTO, mag-i-implement na daw sila ngayon ng batas na kung saan yung mga drivers, car owners will be required to buy a car seat for their children, and the children will not be allowed to board the car without sitting on this kind of safety seats. So makikita mo ngayon na ina-announce pala ng LTO, pero makikita mo yung mga tindahan ay nagdi-display na sila ng napakaraming mga supply ng mga car seat para sa mga bata. And this is amazing. Why is this amazing? Because that kind of law creates another avenue for what? For commerce and trade. Yan, so nagmultiply yung mga relationship, dumadami yung mga organizations. And because of this intensification of relationship, nag-intensify din, dumadami din yung mga tawag doon, yung mga problema na kinakaharap ng mga tao. Yan. Sabi nga dito, while at the same time fostering in people a growing awareness of deepening connections between the local and the distance. That's why today we use the term the global village, and that is actually a paradoxical term because it's opposite. How can a village be the same as global? Parang napakalayo, di ba? Kasi pag sinabi natin na global, malawak, marami siyang nasasaklawan. Pag sinabi naman nating village, ang nasa isip natin ay maliit na lugar na kung saan ang mga tao ay they know each other, they live in they are situated in a similar geographical location, etc., etc. So using the term the global village denotes the increasing connections between people. That's why people who are physically distant or away are now connected, become close to each other through this process of globalization. Kaya makikita natin dito yung role na tinatawag natin the role ng mass media. For example, halimbawa, balikan natin yung example natin about kay Osama bin Laden. And even if Osama bin Laden was located in the remotest mountains of Afghanistan, hiding from the spies, hiding from the missiles of the United States of America, and yet he can be accessed by the CNN. So magtataka ka how resourceful these media people are, how they are able to connect with a very important person, and yet in just less than an hour the news and the interview is already out in the media, and people around the world worldwide are seeing it. And even today, even warfare today, which is so dangerous, can be seen on TV. So parang nakikita na ng mga, parang live na nakikita ng mga tao yung digmaan na nangyayari because it is being covered by the mass media. So this kind of thing creates closer relationship, and this is, I think, the meaning of globalization, because there is a deepening connections, and there is a deepening connection, and there's also a deepening interconnectedness and interrelationship among the world, that in so much so that no country in the world today can say that they are independent and totally self-sufficient, because no country in the world today can say they are self-sufficient, because what happens in another country will also happen to them. Why? It's because of the interdependence and interconnectedness of each other. Okay. Now, here are the characteristics of globalization. There are four. So first, let us discuss the number one. One is the creation of a new and multiplication of existing social networks and activities that increasingly overcomes geographical boundaries. So yung mga social network natin, mga activities natin na ginagawa natin, it is now overcoming geographical boundaries. Why? Because even if you are in another place, you can communicate with another. So tingnan niyo yung mga BPO natin, yung mga, ano bang ibig sabihin ng BPO? Yung mga call centers. Yan. So halimbawa, if I am a manufacturer of an air conditioning unit, halimbawa ngayon ako, o kaya nga, say for example, if I am a, like for example, sa medicine na lang, halimbawa, sabihin na lang natin na, um, like for example, I am in a anong tawag doon? Pfizer, for example, sa medicine sa Pfizer. Halimbawa, kung Pfizer ka, for example, halimbawa Pfizer, um, you are selling your medicine worldwide. So minsan, meron tayong tinatawag na customer feedback, because you also have to care. While you are selling products, you still have to care for your customers. So magse-set up ka ng mga hotline. So instead of setting your hotline in the United States, you set your hotline somewhere in India. Why in India? Because in India, it is cheaper to pay the people rather than paying people in the United States, because there's a difference between the income of the people in the United States and the income of the people in India. So therefore, itong mga companies na ito, nagsusubcontract sila ng mga tao sa ibang bansa na yun ang nagiging parang call center. At itong mga call center agents na ito sa ibang bansa ay tinitrain nila in such a way na yung mga customers nila, they think that this call center agent is residing in the United States. Kaya nga tinitrain yung mga call center agents to be able to speak, to use the American accent or the British accent, depending on the products that they are promoting. So in other words, nagkakaroon ng interconnectedness. Yan. So it's no longer a matter of geographical boundaries na malayo. Kasi wala nang malayo ngayon sa communication, especially with technology. The second characteristics of globalization is the expansion and stretching of social relations, activities, and interdependencies. Okay, expansion and stretching of social relations, activities, and interdependencies. So I have already explained this to you. Third is the intensification and acceleration of social exchanges and activities. Intensification and acceleration of social exchanges and activities. So halimbawa, example, ngayon nagkaroon tayo ng pandemya and people are not able to travel anymore, you will notice that most of the conferences, most of the meetings are being done now online. So therefore, the pandemic does not stop. It does not stop it does not stop put a stop to the economic activity, but rather it becomes a continuing activity. Then number four is globalization also refers to people becoming increasingly conscious of growing manifestation of social interdependence and the enormous acceleration of social interaction. So mayroon tayong tinatawag ngayon na global citizenship and people are becoming now aware. So halimbawa, if you are a person living in a remote place, for example, you are living in a barangay or in a remote village, so why will you be concerned about climate change? Why will you be concerned about the growing number of solid waste, unmanaged solid waste, di ba? Kasi nakikita mo yun sa TV, di ba? Nakikita mo sa TV, nababasa mo sa social media, at kahit siguro bundok ang bahay mo, pag may signal, may connection, you are able to connect to the internet and you are bombarded with a lot of information. And because of this information, you become aware, na meron palang climate change, meron palang pandemic, meron palang economic recession, etc., etc. So nakikita mo yun because of the information being given to you, being fed to you. So yan ang ibig sabihin nito, that globalization refers to people becoming increasingly conscious of growing manifestation of social interdependence and the enormous acceleration of the social interaction. Now, ano ang globalization? Kasi pag tiningnan natin ang word na globalization, parang meron din siyang sariling buhay. Yan. So ano ang ideology? What is the ideology of globalization? The ideology of globalization is globalism. Globalism is the belief that there is a growing interaction and that this interaction is accelerating. And globality, that is the state and characteristics of a globalized world. So in other words, pag sinabi natin globality, that is the end. That is the objective of globalism. Yung globalism, yan yung idea. That's the idea that moves people to believe in globalism. Yung globality naman, that is the vision of globalization. Na in the end, after all this process is concluded, we will find ourselves in the state and characteristics of a globalized world or a world that is interconnected. Okay. So these are also some of the terms that you should remember and know as we progress in our study of globalization. So the term liberalism. So liberalism is a political doctrine that takes protecting and enhancing the freedom of the individual to be the central problem of politics. So in other words, liberalism emphasizes individual freedom, individualism. So this is actually the political philosophy in America. This is the political philosophy in some countries in Western Europe. Yan yung tinatawag na liberalism, an emphasis on the rights of the individual. Then liberals typically believe that government is necessary to protect individuals from being harmed by others, but they also recognize that government itself can pose a threat to liberty. As the revolutionary American pamphleteer Thomas Paine expressed it in Common Sense in 1776, government is at best a necessary evil. Laws, judges, and police are needed to secure the individual's life and liberty, but their coercive power may also be turned against him. So the problem then is to devise a system that gives government the power necessary to protect individual liberty, but also prevent those who govern from abusing that power. Kasi nga dito papasok yung tinatawag natin na ito, social contract. Kasi yung social contract, yung term kasing social contract, actually that was the of Thomas Hobbes. That was the philosophy of Thomas Hobbes. Yung kanyang playwright na Leviathan. In his playwright the Leviathan, he described the relationship between the governed and the government. Kumbaga sabi doon sabi ni Thomas Hobbes, theoretically all human beings are born equal and free. They are free to do what they wish to do. But according to him, as time goes on, people realize that as they become acquainted with each other and exercise this freedom, they realize that the exercise of this freedom is harmful. Kumbaga sabi nila, if we will continue to be free like this, then probably we will not survive. It will not be viable for the human species to survive. So sabi nila, let us come together and let us agree and let us choose somebody to rule over us and let us surrender to him some of our freedoms so that that government will guarantee our existence, guarantee the happiness of our life. Kaya lang, yun nga, the government can guarantee your happiness, can guarantee your security, but at what cost? You will have to surrender some of that freedom. Kaya baga makikita mo ang government, meron siyang coercive power. Like for example, if you violate the law, or if you violate the law, you will be penalized according to the penalty of the law. So the government can put you in prison, or the government can confiscate your property, the government can levy taxes, the government can levy fines, etc., etc. So doon nakikita mo na nalilimit yung power mo, nalilimit yung freedom mo. But at the same time, it gives you the assurance that your life and property and your freedom will be protected by that government. Kumbaga yan ang kasunduan ninyo ng mga tao at ng gobyerno. And basically, that is the idea of liberalism. So sabi nga ni Thomas Paine, the government is a necessary evil. Para sa kanya, government is evil because government is coercive. May power ang government to coerce you, especially if you do not follow the law. Pero at the same time, kailangan siya because without this government, society cannot function. Okay. Another idea is the theory of neoliberalism. So, what is neoliberalism? So, neoliberalism is the ideology and policy model that emphasizes the value of free market competition. So, although there is a considerable debate as to the defining features of neoliberal thought and practice, it is most commonly associated with the laissez-faire economics. In particular, neoliberalism is often characterized in terms of its belief in sustained, sustained economic growth as the means to achieve human progress. Its confidence in free market as the most efficient allocation of resources, its emphasis on minimal state intervention in economic and social affairs, and its commitment to the freedom freedom of trade and capital. So ulitin ko ulit ha. Neoliberalism is the ideology and policy and model that emphasizes the value of free market competition. So ibig sabihin na free market competition, ibig sabihin dito yung ang nagdi-dictate ng economic activity, nagdi-dictate ng mga presyo ay yung needs and wants ng tao, the supply and demand. And although there is a considerable debate as to the defining features of neoliberal thought and practice, it is most commonly associated with laissez-faire economics. In particular, neoliberalism is often characterized in terms of its belief in sustained economic growth as the means to achieve human progress. Its confidence, pag sinabi natin na economic growth, ibig sabihin yung mayroon silang way to measure. May mga formula yan how to measure the economic growth, di ba? May computations yan. And halimbawa ngayon, pag nire-report, halimbawa sa newspaper nabasa natin nire-report na there is a 7.6 economic growth ang Pilipinas sa taong ito. Yan. So para sa kanila, para sa neoliberalism, in order for you to be able to establish a stable society, dapat taon-taon tumataas ang iyong economic growth, because as your economic growth increases or develop, diyan natin nakikita yung progress, economic activity ng country na yan. So it is the means to achieve human progress and its confidence in free market as the most efficient allocation of resources. Para sa kanila, sa paniniwala nila na yung supply and demand, yun talaga ang principle na nag-govern sa economics. That's the sorry. That's the only way to to keep the economy working. Kasi aside from from supply and demand, marami pa ring ibang uri ng economics, yung may centralized planning, lalo na sa socialism, etc. May mga economy naman dictated, pero sabi nila ng neoliberal, it's not efficient. So its emphasis on minimal state intervention in economic and social affairs and its commitment to the freedom of trade and capital. So kumbaga ang emphasis nila is less government, but more of freedom. Yan. So another is conservatism. As a general ideology, conservatism is opposed to the ideals of liberalism and socialism. Conservatism generally refers to right-wing politics which advocate the preservation of personal wealth and private ownership and emphasize self-reliance and individualism. So some important challenges and questions that we need to answer as we go along with the study of the course. So does globalization promote poverty? Does globalization promote hierarchy? So yan ang mga dapat tanungin natin. Itanong natin sa ating mga sarili at dapat makuha natin ang kasagutan sa mga katanungan na yan. So there are still 5 core claims of the market globalism. Ito ang claims ng sinasabi ko na neoliberalism of market globalism. One is the need for an ideology that would decontest ideas to form a meaningful whole. Then, the claim number 1 is globalization is about the liberal and global integration of market. This is anchored on the neoliberal idea of the self-regulating market as the normative basis for future global order. So the vital functions of the free market is rationality and efficiency, as well as its alleged ability to bring about social integration and material progress, and can only be realized in a democratic society that values and protects individual freedom. So kumbaga ang idea ng globalization at saka naka-anchor siya sa integration ng markets, and at the same time politically naka-anchor din siya doon sa idea ng democracy. Okay. Claim number 2 is that globalization is inevitable and irreversible. Para sa kanila, ang globalization daw ay wala na itong kumbaga dire-diretso na to. Wala na itong tawag doon, wala na siyang hindi na siya pwedeng ibalik. We cannot go back to history according to them. Then claim number 3, nobody is in charge of globalization. Ibig sabihin, walang sinumang tao, walang bansa, walang gobyerno ang in charge ng globalization. So para sa kanila, it's just a thing that happens naturally. Okay. Claim number 4, globalization benefits everyone. Para sa kanila, globalization is will benefit everyone. And then number 5, globalization furthers the spread of democracy in the world. So globalization furthers the spread of democracy in the world. So this is my first lecture, and as I conclude my first lecture, I am going to ask you a question, and you're going to answer that question, and I will be posting that question in the Google in our Google Classroom. Thank you very much.